Hey everybody, welcome to our next lesson in algebra this year. This is a review lesson as well, so it's things you've heard before. Might be presented a little bit differently today and hopefully make some new connections for you to help cement this information into your brain a little bit better because you'll need it a lot as we move forward into some of the harder lessons. Today's lesson is on number sets. So grab your notebook and let's throw this into your notebooks. So the title is going to be number sets. Understanding the relationship between different numbers. So number sets. Okay, so there are different groups of numbers. There's little groups of numbers up to bigger groups of numbers. And I like to think of them in terms of buckets, along the way. So I have the first bucket is n, and n stands for the natural numbers. The natural numbers. And those are going to be your counting numbers. Those are your 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on and so forth. They're going to be your counting numbers. That's the smallest group of number we have. This is the simple counting ones. Then there's another bigger group of numbers. So it includes all of the natural numbers. It includes those counting numbers. We call it the whole numbers. They're called whole numbers. So the whole numbers, they're all of the numbers above. So they hold the smaller bucket, but in the bigger bucket, it has one more thing. This time we're going to add 0. So it's all of the other numbers plus 0. So 0 is not a natural number. 0 is a whole number. The next bigger bucket of numbers, it's a funny letter. This one we're going to call Z. And those are your integers. There's a reason why it's not called I, and we'll get into it in a second. Those are called integers. So integers, we're going to add negatives. So -1, -2, -3, -4, all of the negative numbers are integers. -3, it's not a natural number. It's not a whole number. It is an integer. That's the first bucket that it fits into. So we're going to kind of drop numbers into the top one and kind of let them fall down through and see where they're going to be at. So once they find a bucket they fit into, then they belong to all of the buckets below. So if they're in one bucket, they fit the next bigger buckets all the way down through. The next bucket is going to be Q. Is the letter we use to, and it's another one that doesn't make any sense why it's Q. But there is kind of a reason why, as we'll get to in a second. This one is called the rational numbers. The rational numbers. And this is going to be fractions and decimals. Sorry, it's a little hard to write on this sometimes, so a little bit different. So if you add fractions and decimals, so 1/3, 2/3, 0.78, 5/6, 82nd, 26th, or whatever, any fraction, any decimal is going to fit into that bucket. So 1/3, it's not a natural number. 1/3, it's not a whole number. 1/3, it's not an integer. 1/3 is a rational number. That's the first bucket that fractions and decimals fit into, that rational number. And those are part of a bigger bucket. One more bucket. Put an R in that one. Those are called real. Those are called real numbers. So real numbers are all of the numbers up above. Up above. Those are all real numbers. Okay? So we have natural numbers are counting numbers. Whole numbers, you add 0. Integers, you add negatives. Rational, add fractions and decimals. And then real numbers are all of those. All right? So little bucket, natural, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Whole numbers, add 0. Integers, add negatives. Rational, add fractions and decimals. Real is all the numbers. I would pause the video and see if you can repeat that back. See if you can repeat that back to help make sure you got that in place. All right, let's see. 2 more things you need to know. That real bucket, it extends it a little bit farther. I don't think I have room on my board. Let's see. Let me just clear this. I'll clear it and put it back. All right, so that NWZQR, that's really important to know. NWZQR, NWZQR. Kind of memorize that list of things, because then if you write those down, you know it's natural, whole, integers, rational, and real. All right, so control, there we go. Oh, it's different on here. Let's see. Technology. There it goes. It did work that time. Right. So I have my N. The W, Z, Q, R, and my buckets, right? Each one just is a little bit bigger than the one before. This real one actually extends way out. So these are all real numbers, but there's another set of real numbers. Oops, sorry, that line shouldn't be there. Erase that line. The real numbers, they include those, but there's another bucket in the real numbers, and those are called the irrational numbers. That's where the I comes from. And uppercase I stands for irrational. Irrational, and that's a non-repeating, non-terminating, that means it doesn't end, decimal. So if a decimal says something like 0.363636, that repeats. If it repeats, then it is rational. It goes right here. So that would go right here. That is a repeating decimal. So it's rational and it's real. If it's in a little bucket, it drops to the bigger bucket. It's rational and real. But a decimal that might be something like this, it would be 36754 dot dot dot. It doesn't repeat. The dot 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 means it doesn't end. So if it doesn't repeat and doesn't end, it's non-repeating, non-terminating, it is irrational. It goes into this bucket right here. So that decimal would go here. So if it's rational, it's real. If it's irrational, it's real. Rational and irrational are both real. So real numbers is like a really big bucket of numbers. There's a lot of numbers in that bucket from there. All right? Make sense? All right. Let's do a little practice just to show you how these work. So imagine your buckets, N, W, Z, Q, R. Those are your buckets that drop down. So if I have 3, where does 3 go? 3 would go into the natural bucket, right? It's a natural counting number. And if it's natural, then it's whole, it's an integer, it's rational, and it's real. It fits all of those. So if it goes in the little bucket, then it drops all the way down and it's all of those. Okay? What if I have, erase that. What if I have something like -6? Is -6 a natural number? No. Is it a whole number? No, because whole numbers you just add 0. Is it an integer? Yes, because we're going to add negative. So it's an integer. If it's an integer, it's also rational and it's real. It's all of those. So -6 would be all of those. And it's a good idea to just write those all down. So write down N, W, Z, Q, R. And then how about if it's 4? How about, well, let's do 4/5. Let's do a fraction. What if it's 4/5? Is 4/5 a counting number? No. Did we add 0? No. Is it a negative number? No. It has to be a negative whole number. Clarify that it's a negative whole number. Is it a fraction or a decimal? Yes. So if it's a fraction or decimal, then it's rational and it's real. If this was -4/5, if it was -4/5, your temptation would be to put it in the integer bucket, but it's not an integer. The integer is negative whole numbers. If it's a fraction, the first bucket it can go into would be the rational bucket. That's right there. Make sense? All right, go try the practice and see how you do, and then we'll do the check.